Okay, so we will be, okay, I would like to ask Mr. Simon Fellermeyer, Federal Office for the Environment of Switzerland, to deliver your presentation. So the floor is yours, Mr. Simon.
Great, thank you so much. And well, thanks as always to Japan for the leadership, to all the great work that can be done here in this context in preparing us both for the continuation of the negotiations, but also really for the concrete implementation. And I guess, I mean, I've also given a short presentation during the last working group, which was on authorizations. I guess the reason why you're asking me to speak again is because we are one of the few countries that have authorized activities under Article 6. You may have seen that, like this is the first slide, just to tell you what we have done so far. So we've authorized 2 activities, cooperative approaches under Article 6.2, one in Ghana and one in Thailand. And as Philip just very helpfully kind of summarized for all of us, there are certain reporting obligations that are triggered when you decide to authorize. And we obviously tried to fulfill these obligations as best as we could, while noting that some of these authorizations, as the Ghana one, actually happened during COP27. So for example, the format on the initial report was not yet available that we had seen in Philip's presentation. And so we went with an ad hoc document and basically, just as a summary, so what have we kind of uploaded, made public so far? That's authorization statements. Since Philip just said, well, you need kind of a copy of the authorization as part of the initial report. And then these preliminary initial reports or updated initial reports. And I'll share the slides with you, and you can look at them. I've shared them quite a few times among colleagues in the Article 6 space. So this is publicly available. But actually also a tiny note on this. It's only in the aftermath of COP27 that this interim platform for actually submitting your information has become available. I think it's available since end of January. And so we are still kind of recompiling this and reformatting everything such that it's all in line with the guidelines, and then we will submit this. So next slide, please. So I think, I mean, this will be a relatively short presentation because I'm just trying to speak about the aspects here that, well, we have done something on and that we have clarity on. Since this is about implementation, like it's not a negotiation workshop, as we heard, like this will happen next week in an informal way, and then of course in June and at the COP. But basically, if we look at the status quo of reporting on Article 6 so far, we now have kind of almost full clarity on the initial report, with this outline having been adopted at the last COP. And since January or early February, we also have an interim place for submission of that document. Us being one of the few countries that have actually written and well, kind of published initial reports, we also realized that there's still some small questions up for interpretation even on the initial report. And that's, for example, as we know, and as was helpfully explained just earlier, there's different subparts, right? And we have the general information, the activity-specific information. And so one of the questions that the guidance doesn't answer for you, but that I think is also not a huge question, is, well, when I submit my first initial report, I fill in everything. And then our guidance says, well, on the second time around, you just have to update the activity-specific thing. So this is everything, in paragraph 18G to I. And so then you could ask yourself, well, does that mean, my next document will just be that last part, or am I updating my initial document and kind of adding another layer behind? So these are small things, that I think don't make any substantial difference. But some things are just up for interpretation, which was funny for us, like in the Swiss team, as we try to do all of these things, we're like, how should we do this? But I would say the initial report is of course set, and that's extremely important, because we want for countries to be able, in a structured and coherent manner, to submit this information, and for everyone to be able to look at it, and with that, of course, uphold that spirit of transparency. And that's the initial report. And all the rest, there's many other reporting obligations that we have, of course, in our Article 6 guidance, such as the agreed electronic format, and then the regular information. And on that, we don't yet have that same clarity, but I think that's also fine, because inevitably the initial report is always the first step, and that's where we need that clarity, and luckily also have it for the very largest part. Next slide, please. So from the perspective of someone who has already undergone the exercise of trying to fill this out in the most responsible spirit possible, maybe we are able to just share some reflections, and then of course very curious to hear how others see that have maybe already looked at the format and were like, well, how am I going to do this? So I think the challenges that we encountered, which I think are minor, but still, just to share, is that, and I think that's an outcome of any multilateral, in any multilateral process. If you have uncertainty, or you don't yet know 100% how things are going to go, like, you rather write things a bit more broadly. And I think what we see in particular when it comes to the activity-specific information, in which you explain what the project, the corporation is, the text is rather high level, and it doesn't tell you exactly what level of detail of information you're supposed to report. You could do that, very, very deeply. If you, for example, you look at a standard, MADD form of a project, as we know it from the CDM, that's many, many, many pages, and potentially you could try to copy all of these pages and fit them into these few boxes that we have in the initial report, in which you explain your project. And what we have done, you can go back to that, on my kind of second slide, was to kind of try and summarize this stuff in the MADD for these different subparagraphs, and just add the MADD on the side. So that's what you can find on our website. So I think that's, one of the things that's just a bit up for interpretation. And I think there we will probably see over time I mean, someone writes it in a certain way, then maybe people respond and say, hey, I don't think that's sufficient, or this is too detailed, I can't understand. So we'll, I think, just as countries move towards finding out like the right level of detail on this. Another challenge that's, I think, specific to these to the activity, explaining the activity to the world, is that, of course, in most cases, in the majority of cases, you authorize a project together with a partner country, whether you're the host or the partner. And so, of course, you would ideally want to make sure that the information, the way you explain the project, hopefully doesn't contradict the way your partner country explains the project. And so I think that's what we have done before publishing the authorization and the initial report. We have had many rounds of clarification and making sure we understand the same thing. So I think that's another thing, just process-wise, that will take time. But that's, I think, my 2 points on the activity-specific elements. And then, of course, we have the elements that are kind of general to relating to your NDC, the way you use markets, the way you want to run Article 6 cooperation. And I think some of them inevitably, and that may be in the end the reporting challenge, do take time to reflect on and agree on across different ministries. So for example, deciding as a country with different ministries that have a stake in Article 6 cooperation on the arrangements for authorizing, who's going to do it, on what level, who's signing this, for tracking. And that, I think, in particular, may be even more challenging at this point in time, just because there's not yet 100% certainty on what the real tracking options will be that are available on the international level, from the international registry to potentially you having a registry. And that will just come in later. But if you want to authorize something today, you still have to kind of clarify how you do it for today. And so we kind of did this in a rather, again, kind of interim fashion, not knowing the full picture, but knowing that Switzerland will certainly use the emissions trading registry that we have had under Kyoto, and to what degree that's connected to other registries and so on, that we kind of left a bit open. Then another, of course, key point, I think, which I would suspect is probably the biggest point for internal coordination and reflection of its implications, is the method for corresponding adjustment. Especially seeing that, of course, our guidance doesn't say that you can never change this, but the kind of idea is, of course, that you set that method for the entire NDC implementation period. And so today in 2023, if you choose a method, I think the expectation in general is that this method will be followed through up until the end of the NDC implementation period in 2030. And we heard about the options of averaging, trajectory, budgets, and so on. And that, I can very much understand, will take some time. For Switzerland, it was actually quite easy, just because our NDC was already written in a way that made this almost crystal clear. So we just happened to have both a single year target and a multi-year target. And so we were able to simply reference, to a large degree, the information that we had communicated through our NDC. And then these three sub-bullets are really just examples of where I can foresee that countries will require some thinking time and learning time and reflecting time. The last one is also to what degree you want to, and that's again something actually project specific, but still it has kind of, I would say, rather big ramifications for the setup of how you will authorize, is the contribution to ambition in mitigation and adaptation action. So the overall mitigation in global emissions, which are, of course, strong encouragements, but not obligations, and the funding for adaptation that may come out of Article 6.2 cooperation. And we have, taken specific approaches on these two questions and have communicated them. But yeah, I understand that this may require some thinking. And you also, I guess, on this one really have to coordinate with your partner country, because these are often, key aspects to cooperation. And again, I think this is something for countries to discuss, of how to best address these 2 points as well. And so really, as a summary, I think of everything I've said now so far, the initial report to some degree locks in, of course, not permanently, but to some degree, policy decisions for a few years to come. And now one could say, oh, this is really constraining and so on. But I would actually say, this is not, written on the slide, but I would say it's just kind of, it's actually helpful. It helps countries to understand kind of the scale of decision, and while also not trying to overemphasize this or make this bigger than it is, but to some degree, these are kind of important decisions, that will impact countries and NDCs. And so I think the initial report is kind of an instrument that helps us realize this, and also, well, helps us structure these questions. And if we were to go into a cooperation not being able to answer half of these questions, then I think if I was, that policy maker, I would think to myself, wait a sec, I first need to understand like what is going on here. And so in that sense, I would say, yes, this is quite a lot to ask in an initial report before the activity has even started, but it's also really just helping all of us to understand the implications. And of course, needless to say that, both capacity building, as was already mentioned, but also really just sharing of experiences. How have you done it? How have you filled this report in? What level of detail have you gone into? I think that's just super helpful. And I mean, that's one of the reasons that, we are very happy whenever there's such an event to also share what we've done so far, but really also get feedback and learn from the others. And with that, we can go to the next slide, please. And that's actually also almost the end of my presentation. So just again, because these will be uploaded, you can find the links here to both the activities that we have authorized so far with these different sub-documents on authorization, MADD, and the initial reports and validation reports, and all our bilateral agreements, which are kind of, the framework for the authorized activities. And with that, I say thank you. I think there's a last slide with a thank you. Maybe not. There it is. Look, beautiful sky, sunny weather in Switzerland today as well. And back to you, Chair. Thank you very much.
You're wonderful. Thank you very much for a very living or a very fresh presentation from your country, and also for becoming the first speaker as well. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move on to the next second presenter, Mr. Mirza Shaukat Ali, Ministry of the Environment, Forests and Climate Change of Bangladesh. Mr. Mirza, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me say sorry. I was out from the room for a while and I missed the slot, and I have some fever, so I might not sound clear. My voice might not sound clear. Anyway, next slide, please. As you can see, Bangladesh is party to the Paris Agreement, and accordingly, we have submitted our NDC in 2015. Actually, we submitted this before the Paris Agreement, and the first updated, first nationally determined contribution in 2021. We could not submit this by 2020, so we submitted this later in August 2021. Next slide, please. And we are continuing implementation of this updated NDC now. As you can see, at the moment, for CDM, we have two-tier designated national authority. The higher tier is national CDM board, and the lower tier is national CDM committee. But for the upcoming Article 6 mechanism, which we expect to establish in the near future, we're considering to establish a new single-tier National Carbon Market Mechanism Committee. We haven't actually finalized this one, but this is some sort of our initial discussion that we have discussed within ourselves. So we are sharing that National Carbon Market Mechanism Committee, which will be headed by Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And the members will be from Foreign Ministry, Ministry of Finance, and other sectoral ministries, especially those ministries that contribute emission like power, industry, transport, and related other industries. And the member secretary for the National CDM Committee, I am the member secretary for CDM committee. So we'll decide who will be the member secretary for the single-tier National Carbon Market Mechanism Committee. And Department of Environment is going to provide all the technical support, and also For joint crediting mechanism, we are also providing secretarial support for this initiative in the country, and we expect to finalize this institutional mechanism. Probably you are aware that World Bank is providing support to different partner countries. So World Bank is providing support to Bangladesh to establish under partnership for market implementation to establish institutional arrangement and carbon pricing instruments in Bangladesh. So hopefully we shall, through consultation with different ministries and agencies, we expect to come up with some sort of institutional arrangement for this new institutional arrangement. Next slide, please. So as we have reported, we have sent the report. So in terms of the report, tracking the ITMOS, Article 6 registry system will be established with the technical help of the PMI that I have already mentioned, which will actually track the ITMOS. And there will be unique identifiers for following the CMA decision for authorization. We have actually some sort of ambiguity, and hopefully in the future, those will be resolved with implementation arrangements when we will go for actual implementation of project activities. And most recent national inventory report, as we are implementing the biennial update report for the first time in Bangladesh, which we expect to submit by June 2023. It covers inventory year 2013 to 2019. So our third national communication covered up to 2012. So in our NDC, 2012 was the base year, but we are expecting to have like 2030 to 2019 inventory reporting by June 2023. And the NIR, as required in accordance with this 18 CMA1, will be submitted as part of the BTR1. So we are also expecting to come up with BTR very soon. We're going to start the implementation by this year, and hopefully by the end of next year, we are expecting to submit this BTR. Bangladesh participated in the cooperative approach to achieve its NDC targets, which have been revised with more ambitious targets in 2021, aligning with long-term temperature goal of the Paris Agreement. Although needless to mention that our initial initiative under the joint crediting mechanism is not very ambitious, but hopefully with implementation of larger projects, our contribution from JCM initiative will be higher in the near future. Next slide, please. So as you can see about the description of NDC, so our emission reduction target for the 2015 initial national INDC, intended national determined contribution, was only 5% and unconditional, and conditional 10%. But when we revise this and in our updated NDC, we have come up with 6.73% for unconditional contribution, which is 27.56 million ton from the 12 million ton. So you can see jump, quite a huge jump from our intended national determined contribution. Similarly, from the 10% conditional contribution, we have come up with 15.12% conditional contribution, which is 61.3191 million ton emission reduction. As you can see, we have considered the time frame for 2021 to 2030, and our single year target for 2030 with the implementation time frame, as I have already mentioned. And our base year is 2012. Total emission is 169 million ton of total carbon dioxide equivalent, and our business as usual level year to 2030, and by 2030 we are expecting to reach 409 million ton emission reduction. So from that we have actually calculated the emission reduction. So time frame periods for implementation, I have already mentioned that till 2030, and scope of coverage, as you can see, we have tried to cover 100%, but in our intended national determined contribution, we have considered only our energy sector, transport, power, and industry, which was about 50% of our total emission. But in our updated NDC, we have covered all the sectors. So energy, which covers power, industry, and transport, industrial process and product use, agriculture, forestry, and other land use, and waste. So all the sectors we have tried to cover in our updated NDC. And our gases we considered, you can see those gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and HFC. Intention to use cooperative approach. So the cooperative approach under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement are an important instrument to raise mitigation ambition of the NDC, but I have already mentioned that we have to have a more mitigation initiative under this cooperative approach. Next slide, please. So as you can see, so ton carbon dioxide equivalent in accordance with para 1C of the Annex to Decision 2 CMA3 that we have considered. And for non-carbon dioxide global warming potential from the IPCC-4 are used for different information. And methods for applying the corresponding adjustment, I have earlier mentioned that there are a lot of ambiguities, or our understanding is not clear yet. So hopefully in the future, when we shall go for implementation, many things will be, clear. And from this kind of information sharing and this platform, hopefully these issues will be much clearer to us. And certainly with the World Bank Partnership for Market Inflation, we hope to improve our understanding. And also when you go for the institutional management, those things will be further clarified. Thank you. Next slide, please. So you can see quantification of the mitigation information in our NDC. So our business as usual scenario is from power sector was like 94 million ton, and the total energy was 312 million, will be 312 million ton by 2030, and we expect to reduce 85.98 million ton from that sector. And from IPPU, the emission reduction will be very negligible. From FOLU, it will be 1 million ton, and waste sector, it will be 2.45 million. So total emission reduction will be 89.47 ton out of 409 million ton. Next slide, please. So Bangladesh participation scheme established by Japan, and we have actually implemented 4 projects, and one more project is under implementation. It's a transmission line, electricity transmission line, and hopefully after implementation of this project, we will get like 23,000 ton emission reduction from that project, a single project. And you can see one of the example out of these 4 projects that we have implemented. So, and the project was like introduction of PV diesel hybrid system at fastening manufacturing plant. We have actually displacement of grid electricity and or captive electricity by installation and operation of the solar PV system. So it was in an export processing zone. We have implemented this project, and we have actually implemented this project in 2016, and operational lifetime of the project is 9 years. Only 226 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent that will be mitigation target. And the participating park is YKK GPAR in Bangladesh, and in case of Japan, YKK Corporation. So Bangladesh government has 50% of the credit, and Japan government 50% of the credit. Next slide, please. We have tried to inform like this in the cooperative approach about the environmental integrity. So in our report, we have given detailed information. I just want to mention a few points here. So under the environmental integrity, we have actually we are working on different project activities at the moment, side by side with our BUR project for environmental integrity and also transparency. So in this case, ensure no net increase in global emission for each cooperative approach by applying corresponding adjustment. And the methodologies, for example, JCM methodology ensure net emission reduction by setting conservative baselines. And government body National Carbon Mechanism Committee for scrutiny and approval of projects, proposed methodologies and other related activities. And all these things we expect to actually get clarification and better understanding when we implement the partnership for market implementation mechanism. All the projects have to comply the domestic environmental laws. We have Environmental Conservation Act and rules at all stages of the project cycle. So we need to abide by that rules. Next slide, please. So we have some challenges, as I mentioned, that we need to have better clarity and understanding in the future, because this is a very technical initiative. And we have a better understanding on CDM projects, but as this is a new instrument and very technical in nature, so we need to understand this new mechanism, and then how to apply the corresponding adjustment is not also clear yet to us. A lack of proper experience in establishing domestic arrangement in the country for authorization of the use of the ITMOS. Lack of proper experience in developing and maintaining a registry system to track ITMOS. We don't have a registry system now, but hopefully in the future we are going to establish a registry system in the country, so that will give further clarity. And lack of proper domestic MRV system for collecting necessary information on both qualitative and quantitative data on a regular basis. Actually, since we established this, our intended national determined contribution, as well as our updated national determined contribution, we actually tried to establish the MRV system, but we haven't succeeded in establishing a, workable or effective MRV system yet. So that is one of the major weaknesses. So once we establish this MRV system, that will also hopefully help us to improve the other mechanism in the future. Next slide, please. So a need for capacity building, as I have mentioned, that hopefully under the partnership for market implementation, we are going to have some sort of institutional arrangement and capacity building initiative. Apart from that, we actually rely on our good friend Japan. We have a very good relation with Japan since our independence. And Bangladesh has participated in the mutual learning program hosted by IGS Japan and Article 6 Implement Partnership, this platform. And hopefully in the future, with the support of Japanese government and UNFCCC process and also World Bank support, we are going to establish a good institutional arrangement and engage in emission reduction for the globe. And I need to also mention that apart from the government initiative, as we have weaknesses in private sector, we need to improve the capacity of the private sector, because in mitigation initiative, also in CDM, only few entities or few individuals were active when it came to CDM activities. And we need actually support from this platform and other platforms to develop the capacity of the private sector, so that increasing number of private bodies and as well as individuals who might support the establishment of the domestic system need to be established so that we can engage in a greater way in the future. Next slide, please. So that was my presentation. Thank you very much for giving me the time and listening to the presentation. Thank you very much.